Welcome to Godsplaining. Thanks to all who support us. If you enjoy our podcast, please consider making a monthly donation to us on Patreon. Be sure to like and subscribe to Godsplaining wherever you listen to your podcasts. Hello, friends. Father Patrick here, and I'm joined today for this episode of Guestsplaining by the fantastic director of the new film Triumph of the Heart, Mr. Anthony D'Ambrosio. Anthony, thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much, Father Patrick, for having me on. I'm pumped to be here.
I followed this project for some time, and as someone who has spent the first 10 weeks of my priesthood in Poland, I have a special affinity for Poland, for the story of St. Maximilian Kolbe, and for the mystery of goodness and light that's shown in the midst of such darkness and suffering. And I think the story is just so incredible. So I have my own reasons for loving it. But I wonder if you might tell our listeners, how you became interested in the project of telling the story of St. Maximilian Kolbe.
Yeah, it's something that I share quite a bit, and I am just really grateful that he came into my life. To be honest, it wasn't out of my choice. I was not looking for a saint at the time. I was not looking for some sort of religious or spiritual leader. I had lost my faith, and I was in the middle of what I call like a bout of atheism. I had been struck down by a illness that nobody really knew what to do with, that was not diagnosed, and that caused chronic insomnia that at over the period of the times that I was struggling with this ultimately became like life-threatening because it was so bad. I was able to get maybe 20 minutes to 2 hours of sleep a night ongoing. And this went on for months, sometimes years at a time. And I, in the middle of this, lost the relationship with the person that I thought I was going to get married to, and that I loved dearly. I lost the career that I thought I was going to get to have, and ultimately was in a great amount of grief, and experiencing that grief in the midst of this starvation for sleep, in the middle of the night alone, and nobody's up, nobody to talk to. And the only thing that I could really do during that time was write. I took a job as a freelance writer, and one of my clients was a Catholic website that was some sort of startup company that was dedicated to St. Maximilian Kolbe, asked me to do a little biography of him. And I was doing some research on him for that biography when I started to realize that there were these details about his life that just really shocked me, and that changed my entire outlook on who he was. I had gone to seminary, so I was very much like in the know, and he was a favorite among the seminarians that I was with. But the impression that he gave me there was just this like very stern-faced Polish priest. You can see most of the pictures that you see of him, he's like rather gruff and looks very stern, So being an Italian, that didn't really like resonate with me. I felt like maybe
D'Ambrosio.
Yeah,
We need a little bit more rolling R there.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think you would have liked the amount of drinking and smoking that went on with my family, So anyway, I ended up realizing though that I knew that he had sacrificed his life to save the life of another man, and I knew that he had stayed alive for 14 days in a starvation bunker, and ultimately had to be executed because, as saints do, they just won't go away and continue to trouble those that are trying to oppress them. And all of that I knew. But what I didn't know is that he survived in the cell with 3 other men all the way to the point of that execution. And from my vantage point as somebody who is suffering greatly, I realized that there had to have been a miracle of hope that happened in that cell to give all of these other men sort of a taste or a portion of Kolbe's sanctity. And that in some ways he had sort of brought these other men to that doorstep of heaven, that threshold of heaven that he was about to cross when he was injected and executed. He was singing songs with them. He was praising God with them, and their voices were sort of being heard through the windows resonating outside even of the prison bunker, and their song was joined by the other prisoners in that, not just in the cell, but in all of the other cells around them. And eyewitness testimony said that not only did it transformed what sounded like hell into what sounded like a cathedral, but also that thousands of lives were saved by their witness. And that just began to haunt me. And I began to have these conversations with Kolbe, I guess, in the middle of the night, in the dark night of my soul, as I was grappling with, like, why live if life is marked by so much suffering and there's no real hope in front of me for a change to that, for a diagnosis and healing. And ultimately, much later, I did get a diagnosis that sort of figured it out and helped heal me, that sort of propelled me into the process of making the movie. Yeah, I think that in the beginning of it, it was really a personal sort of working on my own, I guess, soul, like an act of desperation to write the script for the film.
Now, for listeners who don't know, or who maybe are a bit fuzzy on the details, St. Maximilian Kolbe voluntarily took the place of another man who had been tapped to be executed. Can you fill out the details of how he ended up in this place, how he ended up in this cell at this situation in the Nazi occupied Auschwitz camp?
Yeah, so for listeners who are Catholic and perhaps are like familiar with EWTN or with Bishop Barron or Father Mike Schmitz, like Maximilian Kolbe was sort of the first of that type. He had one of the largest newspaper and media syndicates in Europe at the time, in Poland, and was frankly a very powerful person because of this role. He had a great deal of influence. Was a tremendous entrepreneur. Led even to sort of new inventions and how printing presses worked in order for him to be able to reach the millions of people that he did every day. But because he was not seen as friendly to the Nazis when the Nazis invaded Poland, he was, along with many other Polish dignitaries and influencers and leaders, was taken to Auschwitz for dehumanization and extermination. And I think this is one of those kind of forgotten parts of the war, because the Holocaust obviously became center stage for the use of Auschwitz. But before the Holocaust really got kicked off in full swing, Auschwitz was established to subjugate the Polish people. The Germans really wanted to turn Poland into a sort of a subservient, I guess, race of servants to their German masters, and to create almost like a suburb of Germany with Poland. And so this was a big part of their strategy, was not to just exterminate these people, but to really dehumanize them and break the soul of Poland, a place that was historically very prickly and difficult to subjugate. So Kolbe, when he was brought into this into the camp, was famous for comforting the other men around him, for becoming a pastor to really all of the different diverse people that were in there at the time. And that led ultimately to this moment of stepping out of line during this lineup. If anybody was discovered missing, they would take 10 people at random from that person's group of fellow prisoners and would starve them to death in a starvation bunker. And so during one of these lineups where these men were being selected, Kolbe volunteered to take another man's place, who cried out, "I've got wife and I've got children." The priest, Kolbe stepped forward, said, "I'm a Catholic priest, take me instead." Miracle of miracles, they actually accepted this and didn't shoot him on the spot, which was more of the norm. And from inside of that cell, he began to sort of stage what I call a rebellion of hope, singing songs, praising God. Of course, these were the only people in the camp that were allowed to to pray, because the Nazis couldn't do anything worse to them than what they were doing. So they were free in some ways to let their voices sing out. And this was like the most unexpected thing that could have happened. And Kolbe ultimately was executed because he was causing so much trouble for the Nazis at the time.
I've been to Kolbe's cell, and here I mean monastic cell, not prison cell, his room at the conventual seminary in Rome, where he lived for a time, and it's an incredible thing. They have a number of possessions of his there. People can stay there, by the way. It's a lovely. The wing of the seminary is a lovely hotel now, and it's a great restaurant. It's a great place to eat. But but you could see it was visiting Kolbe's cell there in Rome and seeing a lot of the memorabilia that had been arranged. There's a beautiful exhibit there as well by the Franciscans that I saw his impact, because it's one thing to read this biography and see a few numbers as you were pointing out, and then it's a different thing to realize the kind of impact that St. Maximilian Kolbe had as a communicator, advocating for Marian devotion and for a number of other causes. It was remarkable to me that he would have been targeted as an effective priest by the Nazis, and really I think adds so much more to this story, because he was effectively a famous priest, and then goes on to this great act of heroism. But I bring up his cell because I wanted to compare that to the prison cell in Auschwitz where he was held. What was your first visit to the cell in Auschwitz like? What did you notice in that place, and what did it tell you about Kolbe?
Yeah, I think anybody that's been to Auschwitz can almost like feel the grief in the place. Like it feels like it's even the walls are crying out, and I felt that very dramatically inside of the bunker. I mean, this you go down into the sort of basement level of this like terrifying bunker. This is the place where all of the experiments were happening that Dr. Mengele, the famous like Nazi like doctor, was conducting, and this is where they were first experimenting with gas and lots of other like really terrible like tortures. And so you could just imagine how suffocating it would be to be led down this hall, listening to the cries of these other people who are suffering in perhaps like the greatest anguish that a human can experience, the greatest loneliness that a human can experience. And then to be thrown into this cell, one of the things I noticed was that there were on the door, there was like fingernail, like claw marks, like all over it, digging against the door. It's the stuff of nightmares, truly the stuff of nightmares. Right outside their cell was the death wall where people were being executed by the thousands. And so you can just like, I think the drama of the story really comes to life when you understand just how dark and how evil and how, I guess, how nightmarish that would have been for these other people that Kolbe was sort of pastoring. And I immediately felt like I never wanted to be there again. I didn't want to tell the story. I didn't want to have to live inside of the story anymore, because it felt like it just felt too crushing. Like the suffering of it felt too crushing. But I was there for Kolbe's feast day in 2022. I had been there for like a while writing the script, and I was actually still very sick. I hadn't received like a proper diagnosis yet, so I wasn't sleeping, and I had been up all night and had gotten up in the morning and had this moment with God where I'd been here specifically for this day to be there and celebrate it with Maximilian Kolbe in Auschwitz, as the Polish people do. They process to Auschwitz, have a mass on the front in front of the cell, and then sing the songs that would have been sang inside of the cell, most likely. And um, I just felt I was like, God, I can't do this. Like, I can't go there again. It's just it's too terrifying and too just like I can't see you there. Even with this saint, it feels like impossible that you could have redeemed this place and redeemed this story. But I was given some sort of comfort to kind of go along, and while I was there and experiencing the mass, I was just this like such a profound juxtaposition of darkness and hope, and such a triumph, that this place now is dead, and the memory of Kolbe is what lasts and what has overcome. And I went up to reverence the cell at the end of Mass, kind of like they do the cross for Good Friday. They'll walk up down into the cell, come out, and then reverence a relic. And when I kissed the relic, I felt like, oh, man, I felt a man kiss me back. And it was actually I was like shocked by it. And I like jumped back and like and bumped into the person behind me because I was so like, surprised and startled. And I really just felt like him saying, it's okay. Like God wins, love wins in this story, and take courage and tell it. And so, I think that our film ultimately went down into that darkness, and really kind of grappled with it in a very real way. But also really shows like the full power of like the resurrection to in that space. So that was a long-winded answer to what you asked, but
well, I sympathize with that very deeply, because that's my own impression as well. I visited the camp. I'm happy that I was able to pay respects to the many Jewish men and women, but also our co-religionists, our fellow Catholics, who died there, to honor their memory, and that was a great privilege. And I have no desire ever to go back. I think it's important, very important, that the camp is kept as part of the historical memory, because it's not merely the evil that took place there, because ultimately there was a great victory won over it. The thing that I was struck by when I first visited Kolbe's cell, though, was the Easter candles that had been left there by the popes. And at first I thought, well, that's just such a silly sign. These are like half burned down candles that are just worn. But in subsequent years, I realized just how powerful it is to insist that there was a small light in the darkness, because when a place is very dark, even a simple light can cast such brightness over the shadows. Even the smallest light has such a radiant effect. And I think that the candle is a perfect sign of the goodness of Saint Maximilian Kolbe and of the other men who joined him in singing and praising God there in that cell, because as dark as everything was, that there was still the light of their faith, there was still the light of their prayers, and that left a deep impact on me. It really meant something profound.
Yeah, there's something about that period of history that I think grabs us, because it paints such a profound contrast of light and darkness, and you kind of have to grapple with, like, if I were to complain today about something going on in my life, like, it would pale so much in comparison to what these people had to go through and experience. And ultimately, if Kolbe could pray and find hope and find a reason to live and a reason to fight in the midst of that darkness, then there's really nothing that should hold me back from like praising God. Like I know that without a shadow of a doubt that it's possible for me to find God in the midst of my own suffering and the circumstances that I find it difficult to seek him in.
Yeah, I can deal with a boring homily or with lack of air conditioning in a church.
Right.
those things won't beat me down. No, it's true. The perspective is so powerful. Now, tell us a little bit about the production. The film was all the filming, everything was done in Poland, and that must have added something to the project. What was it like to be working abroad? What was it like to be working in the land where the story unfolds?
Yeah, I mean, so this is my first major feature-length film, and it was done on a shoestring budget. I mean, if you want to compare Cabrini, if anybody saw that that's listening right now, that was made for something like $40 million. My movie, or our movie, was made for about $500,000. So a like fraction of a fraction.
Anthony, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Especially since the testimonies, I haven't yet watched the film, but I've seen the trailers and some of the other things available. But the testimonies and the parts that I've seen are exceptional. The production quality is very good.
Yeah. I mean, part of that is the fact that we did it in Poland. We would never have made the movie for the quality that we made it for, and for that price in the United States. Part of it is that. So
you now run a Polish production studio.
Basically, it's more of like an American / Polish.
Dambrosiowski.
Yeah, Dambrosiowski. Oh my gosh, dude! I am going to introduce myself that way next time I go back to Poland to everybody I meet. Oh my gosh,
Szczęść Boże, jak się masz?
Oh man, that completely destroyed my train of thought. I'm now
sorry. We were talking about the glory of filming in Poland. You had something very profound to say.
Oh, that made me laugh so hard. Well, yeah, I mean, so I posted on Facebook when I was thinking about doing this, and I was like, does anybody know anyone in the film industry in Poland? And, you know, like, the Catholic world is just so small. It's so crazy small. And one of my friends happened to know somebody that was connected to the university there that's sort of like, they have an EWTN, basically, that has a university for media. And one of the professors there has done a few feature-length Saint movies that are actually really, really good. Nobody in the US would have heard of them because they were never even like subtitled in English. They were just released in Poland. But they were really impressive production quality for very similar budgets to what I was looking at. So I went and had dinner with this guy in Poland when I was there researching the script, and it was very strange because it was like meeting a more heavyset Polish version of myself from like an alternate dimension. Like this guy was a total kindred spirit. So like I
like sub carbonara for kielbasa. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. He shows up in like August weather and like a 3-piece suit with like suspenders and stuff to pick me up. I was just like, this guy is larger than life. But I just went through all of the things that I was like, how much does it cost to get like a German car? Like if I wanted to create like an Auschwitz set, like where do you go in Poland to do that? Like how much did it cost and he knew all of these things because he had like produced some movies, and I was like crunching the numbers and doing it. I was like, one of my friends and coworkers, person that ended up producing our movie, she worked on The Chosen. So I called her up and I was like, hey, I think that we could really do this movie that I've been working on. Like, I want you to read the script. It's done. And here's like an initial budget that I put together with this guy that I just met in Poland. And she was like, these numbers don't make any sense. And actually, I was very, very, very far off from like how much it would actually cost. But it still was an amazing experience to like come back. We started fundraising and got the money within like 6 months, which was crazy. I was like, I'm asking people basically to give me a house, and I've never even made a house before, you know? So this is like a big ask, but people saw what we were doing. They saw God's sort of, I guess, anointing on it and really felt compelled to give. And we were back in Poland within 6 months, making a movie. And yeah, it was the most grueling, difficult, beautiful experience of my life by a long shot. It's going to be really hard to sort of come back from that and feel like anything else is quite as much of an adventure. Being in a country that you don't know the language, where all the systems are different, like it's kind of like planning a wedding. If anybody's planned a wedding or like a really big party for hundreds of people, it's like doing 20 of those in a row, like every day, but you don't have any family or any friends, and you don't speak the language, and you have zero network to like rely on for favors, and you don't even know where to go to sort of, there's no Amazon, there's no Walmart, like you don't know where to go to get stuff. They don't have dryers, so like yeah, air dry everything. I had one of the funny moments was like, I had, because of this, and we were like moving around a lot as we were like getting ready for the film, I didn't have a clean clothes because I never had enough time to like finish drying the clothes before we like moved on to the next location or the next place.
Yeah, and it takes suspenders a long time to dry, so you gotta factor that in. Yeah. When am I gonna wash my suspenders?
Exactly. Oh my gosh. So I pretty much wore the same like shirt and pants for like 2 months while I was shooting. It's pretty gross. But it felt like in some way I was like connecting with the conditions of the people we were shooting with. Yeah, exactly. Penitential for everybody else around me too. But no, it was like being a missionary, really, and building a community of missionaries who were sort of all on this retreat into almost like an Ignatian retreat into the heart of Kolbe's story, as we were all collectively meditating on that. And the sort of spiritual slipstream that was created for all of us as we were working on it, is part of why when people watch the movie, they feel so overcome and shocked by kind of like what sort of comes through the images. It's really, what we did was really impossible, and I don't think that we'll ever be able to do something like that again with the money that we did. But I think the reason why we were able to do it was because of Kolbe's blessing and because of the sort of collective meditation that was like building and amplifying what God was doing among us personally while we were there.
Now, having been up against so much, certainly you must have been feeling like this is never going to work. What was the moment, if there was a moment, was there a moment when you thought to yourself, yes, this is it? Something like came together, a scene maybe that was shot, or something with your team where you just knew that this was going to all come together.
I mean, I think that there were so many moments of that. It's really hard to pick one out, just because as soon as we started shooting, everything was like magic. I think, though, that when I met Marcin Pachna, the actor that plays Kolbe, was definitely one of those moments. This director that I told you about earlier, his name was Vitek. He knew Marcin and had worked with him in a small way on a different project, and just had a sense. He had an intuition that Marcin might be a good hit. So he put us in touch, and Marcin is Catholic. So I went out there, and he had prepared dinner for me. I went over to his house, and as soon as I met him, I had this just immediate like feeling that this was who I had been looking for, to play Kolbe. And as the conversation kind of developed, what I learned was that he had lost everything in a rock bottom moment through his alcohol addiction, and had gotten into AA, and had given his life to God through like the 12 steps. But Maximilian Kolbe is the patron saint of addicts, which is, I think, a little known kind of fact. And so he had developed this like amazing relationship with Saint Maximilian Kolbe as he was sort of journeying through his process of recovery, and in many ways credits like that sobriety to that friendship that he developed with Kolbe. So it was just this feeling of like, if you've ever met somebody that you had a best friend, and this best friend had a best friend, but you never met that other person, and then you met the other person, you were like, now we're going to be best friends, and I can totally see why. That was what it was like. It was like God had been preparing both of us, me as the writer and director, and him as this actor, kind of two separate parts of the world, just sort of putting the chess pieces together to get us to meet up and be prepared to, like, in that moment, to partner in telling the story. And you can just tell, I think, the way that I could tell that this man knows who this saint is when he's portraying him on screen.
Incredible. Certainly, you talked about finances and the coordination, the difficulty of working abroad in a foreign country. Was there a specific moment where you had a great challenge? Was there a scene that was really difficult to pull together, something that you couldn't quite get your mind around through the filming?
I mean, there were a lot of scenes that were really, really, really difficult. I mean, the whole movie is like, you can't phone it in for anything that's an Auschwitz historical drama. One of my friends, who is a director, when I was talking to him about the idea when I was first, like, batting it around, he was like, please, Anthony, do not do this for your first film. Like, do something where you have orphans winning a sports tournament, like that you can do like a really, like, mediocre / good job and make a good movie and be fine. But if you do this, everything has to be absolutely perfect, like perfect. You can't make any mistakes. And he was right. Like, everything was just, you have these scenes every single day to shoot that are just brutal. But the most difficult of them were the ones that were happening outside in Auschwitz. We have a lot of the movie is set inside of the cell. And there's difficulty in sort of the interplay of the dynamics between the prisoners that was very complicated to block out. But the shoots where we were shooting, the lineup scene where Kolbe steps out of line, there's another big scene halfway through the movie where the Germans are torturing women by having them carry bags of concrete in a circle until they die from exhaustion, and doing so sort of directly to demoralize Kolbe by doing it outside of his window. And not only are these scenes like incredibly brutal emotionally to direct, but we're shooting it in you can't shoot in Auschwitz anymore. It's a graveyard and very, sacred. So they don't let productions kind of come out there. So we found this place that was close by that was also sort of a bunker and then a textile factory, and then, like a barracks, then a textile factory, then had been repurposed for an apartment complex. That was sort of like a low income apartment complex. So we had to work with the city to clear all the cars out of here, and to set up a set, you have all of these, you have all this equipment, big German vehicles, German shepherds, people are training the dogs. You have this whole like economy that kind of comes together to make this thing happen with lots of equipment and big things moving around. And because of that, you have to have really strong security, especially when you're in a place that's like pretty low income. I mean, we have some Polish stars who are on the set, and they're walking around. So people knew who these people were. Anyway, in the middle of that day, we had a person drive their car, like almost running over our security, almost running over people, just drove it right through the set.
Parked it right
in front of where we were going to, and parked it right in front of where we were going to shoot, and then tried to extort us for thousands of dollar bribe to get her to move her car. And we actually did not. We might have looked like we had a lot of money, but we had like that much money, so we couldn't actually bribe her.
Zero zloty.
So we had no that zloty. Much, but But the problem is, like, you know, when you're filming, what you're doing every day essentially is you're racing the sunlight. Like,
Right.
you have to get, if you're shooting outside and you don't have like a massive CGI budget, or you can't say, hey, we're just going to push the shoot back and shoot here another day. Like, you have to get the scenes. You have to get the scenes. So it's like 12 o'clock and you're trying to, all right, we're going to break for lunch. We're going to try to figure this out. 1 o'clock we come back, like, can't figure it out. We're just going to build up sets around the car in order to shoot other things. But ultimately, the big scene that we have to get is right where the car is. And one of the things she did was she was blasting like German house music, like from her car, so that we couldn't shoot anything with dialogue or sound. And it was literally like screaming with our team, like demonically screaming back and forth as we're trying to like negotiate or get it out. And thousands of dollars every moment are going out the window, just, you know, like we're burning money. And so this scene that we're trying to shoot is like super complicated because you have a German Nazi who's singing this song, Erica, like boisterously, like a drunken kind of marching song. And this Polish woman who drops her bag of concrete at his feet and stands up to him and begins to sing Rota, which is a Polish, like patriotic Catholic anthem. And everything is timed in the shoot to those two songs. And so you have like stunts that are happening to the timing of the songs. You have music that's happening to the timing of the songs. And like the acting has to be sort of like unbelievably dramatic and like profound and intense. And yeah, so we finally get her husband when he comes home from work at 4 p.m. to move it. And now we have, I think, like an hour and a half left to shoot a scene that was supposed to take us something like 5 hours to shoot. Yeah, we get it all kind of put together, like it's happening. The performances are great. And there's this one last moment where after the woman sings, she is shot. And Kolbe picks up her song from inside of the cell, and the other men inside of the cell begin to sing the song that she started. And then somebody outside in the lineup, they have a bunch of men who are in line watching, sort of forced to watch these women being tortured. And one of the men steps out of line and begins to sing with Kolbe, and he is then shot. And then the Germans, in sort of this like intense like rage, go back to the commandant to like ask him if they can kill all the men in the cell and get rid of them. So that's sort of like the final kind of moment of the scene. The crescendo of the scene is this one character stepping forward and getting shot. And we realized that as we had all of them sitting there, we have like, I think maybe like 25 extras who are the men who are here. And one of them has been trained to do the song, to do the stunt. And we realized that all of them had been filmed in a scene that happens. We'd shot it earlier, but it's a scene that happens later in the movie, but not that much later. So it's like, if we shoot this person, then we can't use this other scene that happens like, you know, like 10 minutes down.
Oh no.
Just in all the chaos of everything, we had like lost track of the continuity of the movie.
Right.
And
right.
It's just really, really easy to do that. Like, it's one of those things where if you're shooting out of order, it's just like, yeah. So we all kind of looked around like, what are we going to do? And we realized that I was the only person that knew the song and I had shaved my head with the actors. So we're like, okay, I guess I'm going to have to do it. And we sort of put me through a pit stop. Like it was like NASCAR, you know, like all of a sudden hair and makeup like sets me down on a chair. Their like costume is taking off my clothes, like cutting it off me, while like the hair and makeup is like shading up my beard. This like the Polish star who is with us is the Nazi who is singing the song. So he was teaching me the song, like singing it with me while I'm like breathing in my own beard hair while they're like shading it. And I kind of know, like, this is the moment. If I don't get this, like, not only we don't get the scene, but I lose the respect of like the entire set. Or, you know, if I do it, like this will be one of those moments where everybody is going to
Oh
like
my
talk about
gosh.
it, and I will become like a legendary director in Poland, you know. And yeah, I like went up there and one taked it, you know. And I'm not a great actor, but I even like cried, you know, because it was like such a, it was just, I felt like so in the moment, and everything just felt so real. But yeah, and it worked pretty well. So I'm in the movie with a cameo. Not that I intended that, but it's a little Easter egg for anybody that watches it. So that was one of the hardest, most crazy days.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's totally nuts, man.
Yeah.
I did not expect a story quite that incredible. No, I think that is the stuff of legend. I hope that the whole crowd just began singing, you know, like stole a lot to you.
It wasn't a still up moment. I mean, everybody honestly was like crying because they felt so like, yeah, like, yeah, I don't know how to describe it. Like
Like
God's
you're all in
presence
at that
was,
point. You're
yeah,
all in.
God's presence
Yeah.
was so
Mm,
profoundly there in
mm.
moments like this where just like God would stage these rescues. Like that shouldn't have happened and been that good. Like that, it just should not have worked. Like at that point, everything should have failed. We should not have been able to do that scene in like whatever an hour. But but it was like when we finally got picture
Wow.
up and got everybody in place, the God just sort of like gave us extra power, like a little NOS fuel
Wow.
injection, and we were like overcome with the feeling of the presence of God in the story.
Anthony, what's your hope for people who see the film?
Um, I think that I wrote this myself, like out of this desire to find God in the midst of my own hopelessness and my own despair, and um, I guess in the places where I felt like God couldn't reach in my life. And I think everybody has those places, regardless of like how kind of profound somebody's suffering is in the moment. Um, I think everybody has things that they're not willing to trust God with in their lives, questions or like stories or wounds. And I think that this movie has a really profound potential to like to very gently, like with the complete compassion that Kolbe had for the other men that he was in the cell with, to like sort of like remove that barrier and to touch that wound and to communicate God's love to that place. And so I really like, I know that that's what's happening because I've watched people watch it probably 100 times now. It's like thousands of people. And I think it's the experience of it doesn't change. Like every place that I've shown it, it has that effect where you can hear, you know, the sobs at the end of the movie, and they're not sobs of like, you know, anger or despair. They're like the sobs of a release, you know, of something that was held up that hadn't been able to be like healed yet by God. And so that's what I want people to experience, and what it seems like God is continuing to do with the film.
I think, Anthony, through Saint Maximilian Kolbe's intercession, that prayer, that fervent hope will be answered. There's no doubt. Where can people find the film? How can they follow you and support your project?
Yeah, so I don't know when when this podcast is coming out. So it depends because the next 4 weeks are like each week changes the like the what people can do. It's coming out on September 12th, with some screenings on September 11th. But that weekend is when it will be in theaters. It'll be in select theaters. Right now, this week and next week, people can make sure that it screens in theaters in their city by participating in basically a crowdfunding campaign to bring the movie to their city through a buyout. So that's something that people can do. They can go to kolbemovie.com and they can see where perhaps there's screenings already that are being funded in their city, and they can kind of donate to those to get a ticket and hopefully to get them to happen. Or if it's not in their city, then to be able to just launch a campaign and see if there's other people in their area that can donate to it and get tickets. So that's how people can kind of get to it right now. And then, God willing, if all of that works really well and we have a lot of screens and that one was open in your city, then you'll be able to find other show times for that later on in the week and the weekends. And again, if we do well with those, then we'll stay in theaters for a little bit longer as well. And then later on down the road, we'll definitely do some sort of streaming play, like in the winter.
Awesome. So the latest updates about where to see the film can be found at kolbemovie.com. And I first found out about the film on social media, so I would encourage people to give your Instagram account, which is especially well curated, a follow. Friends, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Godsplaining. It's been a joy to sit here and chat with Anthony and to find out these wonderful stories about the film. For me, it was very encouraging. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend who you think needs to hear Anthony's message. Be sure to like and subscribe to Godsplaining. Follow us on social media. Check out godsplaining.org for the latest information about our upcoming events and to shop Godsplaining merch. And above all, friends, please say a prayer for us. Know that we're praying for you. God bless.